Turns out gay nerds are some of the worst people in the world.
I'm gonna join the Nazis. No joke. Yeah, that's right. You heard me. The next Adolf Hitler.
당신 깐나파.
That's right, we fucking got him, dude.
You just got pranked, bro.
Because, like, the show started out with the first Pestilence album that didn't have Martin Van Drunen doing vocals on it. But then there was, like, the funny quote there. And then it wasn't more Pestilence. Instead, it was the band that Martin Van Drunen joined after Pestilence. What a great obscure death metal joke that definitely was actually funny and people actually got. But we're not doing Osfix or Pestilence this week. Although we could say it's somewhat Pestilence adjacent, at least considering the early Pestilence material, because this week we're talking about Thrash. If you don't know what Thrash is, it's a term that's been around since the 80s. Maybe a bit hard to define because you got like thrash metal and then you have speed metal. And if you ask like some old heads, they'll tell you thrash is the stuff that sounds like this. The kind of weird meeting point between metal and hardcore punk as typified by Corrosion of Conformity and DRI and whatnot. And then they'll tell you that this kind of stuff right here, like your Exoduses and your Megadeths and whatnot, is actually speed metal and not thrash, according to the original definition of the word. But most people nowadays, when they're talking about speed metal, they mean the stuff that sounds like this. This kind of proto-power metal stuff with the really repetitive drum beats. And let's focus on heaviness, more just kind of really fast streams of melody and whatnot. And then when they say thrash, they mean stuff that sounds like this, with the heavy use of palm-muted guitar strumming and the punk drum beats. Overall kind of heaviness. It's thrash, you know, this is thrash. For most people, when they're talking about thrash, they mean this kind of stuff right here. But what kind of thrash are we going to be talking about today?
단발보단 긴 머리가 좋아요.
Well, we're probably working with the more modern definition of what thrash metal is, if you can tell by this. And also, we are going to be talking about Russian thrash metal bands. In fact, we're going to be talking about bands that started back when it was still called the Soviet Union. Remember that? You know, the good old days. Although technically, only one of the albums we're covering this week came out back when the Soviet Union was still around. All three of these bands were formed when the Soviet Union was a thing. And so this episode doesn't get crazy long, we're going to limit it to one album per band. Although I would say I'd pretty much recommend all of these bands' entire discographies. So the oldest band here, Shah. They are from the 80s, and they are probably the most American-sounding thrash metal band of the bands we will be listening to tonight. And until recently, I thought they had all taken like goofy pseudonyms. Like there's a dude named Antonio Garcia that's the main composer, and there's like another guy named like Miguel something in this band. And I was like, oh, you know, their names are really like Ivan or something. And they're just using these pseudonyms to sound like a Californian thrash metal band, since those bands tend to have a whole lot of people with
Viva la raza
sounding surnames. But as it turns out, the main guy in this band actually is named Anton Garcia. He's still a Soviet. He's born to a Spanish father and a Russian mother, and he actually lives in Spain now. So apparently half the info I was reading about these guys for years and years was fucking wrong. But anyways, these guys are great, and if you take nothing away else from this episode, you should listen to Shah because they're awesome. They are defined by one singular feature, and that would be Antonio Garcia's massive rhythm guitar prowess. He's really good at doing these like palm-muted gallop triplets. Possibly the best I've heard in any band. This is their first album, and it's my favorite because it has a really wacky production. Good instrumental separation, but that guitar sound is fucking nuts. And they're really big on these very involved like build-ups. Almost kind of progressive if it wasn't so aggressive, if you get what I'm saying. This shit is consistently heavy from beginning to end, and it's got lots of really good like layering parts that are building up the stuff. That melody back there is going to become important later on. The vocals of Mr. Garcia might be an acquired taste for some. I like them, I don't love them. but the rest of the band's performance more than makes up for it. But yeah, this shit's heavy, and god damn does that guy palm mute like a motherfucker. This is one of the best thrash metal albums of all time. Just so many like cool like string skipping riffs. Really good integration of like the vocal cadence with the actual rhythms of the music. Very, very precise thrash, but it also has enough of a raw edge to keep things interesting. See, I told you that melody earlier was going to be important because it becomes the chorus of the song, or rather this like pre-chorus section. The guitars under there are doing a thrashier version of that lead melody from earlier. Interesting stuff. Good songwriting on this album. Lots of great long build-ups. Hard not to have like really, really long samples because of how good this album is, how well put together it is. It's kind of hard to talk about it without just playing an entire fucking song. But it's great. I mean, this band sings in English, so it's probably a little bit less
Get out of here, stalker.
than some people might be hoping for, but I don't know, this is one of my favorite thrash metal albums of all time. And while I did say it is consistently heavy the entire way through, that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of variety going on here. This is my favorite song on the album. It's called Blood Brothers. And it has a really cool, like, melodic build-up to, like, the main verse riff. Actually, most of the song is a build-up to that. And it's got some cool layered melodies coming out of the guitar there with a lot of cool effects on it before it crashes into some really nasty thrash riffs. This is like almost death metal level intensity. Like that crazy chromatic palm muted thing he's doing there. If you downtune that, that could be a suffocation riff. But they keep it pretty darn thrash. It's really, really high quality, just like build-ups and come-downs with this band. Almost like a speed thrash metal version of The Chasm. Which, I mean, The Chasm is one of my favorite bands, so if you can do that in a thrash context, given that thrash is one of my favorite genres, I'm gonna like it. Speaking of American thrash metal influence, they are doing kind of like a little Diamond Head tribute here, very much in keeping with their Metallica influences, because Metallica always used this riff from Diamond Head when they covered Am I Evil. But, you know, Shah decided to tech it up to show the capitalists what the power of the proletariat can do for your right-hand picking techniques. This is such a cool little transition right here. Thanks, sweet picking, dude. And here we go, main riff. This is the main riff of the song, and it's great. It sounds like Megadeth on amphetamines, and Megadeth was already on a lot of amphetamines, so you know that these guys mean fucking business. What a great riff. It's got all these like cool hammer-on pull-off things. I don't know. Shah, great album. Beware. That's the name of the album. It's their first album. All their albums are pretty good. They put out a few of them. But this was the one that came out back when it was like still the Soviet Union, and it's probably my favorite, I think, just because I heard it the first out of all theirs, and it's the one I've listened to the most. Next!
언니는 앞머리 있는 게 좋아, 내가?
This one came out in 1993 after they'd already been active for a while. The name of the band is Aspid, and the name of the album is Extravasation. And it is very fast and very technical, and quite a bit more Russian sounding, if you'll forgive my disgusting foreign conceit. Mostly because it's all in Russian and they got the Cyrillic logo, but I don't know, this just seems way closer to some kind of weird tech death thrash thing than the more California sounding shit you heard from Shah back there. Aspid, I think, is a Russian rendering of the word asp.
Oh, fuck that bitch!
No, not ass. Asp. Like the poisonous snake. I'm just going on that based on the album cover. It's got this spooky snake dragon coming out of like a cityscape. I don't know, it's cool. It's an awesome painting. I dig it. But that rather fast-paced, almost kind of speed metal-y thing you heard there isn't really representative of their sound as a whole. That was just, I thought, my favorite riff on the album. Most of their stuff sounds more like this. usually pretty slow for thrash metal and very atmospheric and strange. They're definitely a progressive thrash metal band. Most of their songs are about 10 minutes long, at least, if not longer. And they have like a really weird sort of like proto-Meshuggah thing going on, where they have these just kind of like chuggy riffs that are played in odd time signatures with like lots of starts and stops. And his vocals are fucking bonkers. But yeah, because this album's full of stuff like this, you have to be careful which version of it you buy, because the commonly available OSDM Music Records 2013 re-release for the 20th anniversary is a bootleg, and they played the vinyl at the wrong speed and sped everything up, which kind of like fucks it up, I think, because you don't get this like same sense of atmosphere with like how slow and crushing this is. Instead, you want to get the Metal Race Records reissue from 2015. That's good stuff. And it's on Bandcamp right now. You can do that thing where you just buy the MP3s and get the CD in the mail however much later. Speaking of Meshuggah, check out this weird jazz fusion solo! Dude, these guys are the most Meshuggah-ish thing before Meshuggah, if that makes sense. Just lots of weird noises, odd time signatures, but those vocals, I don't know, like, I like Jens Kidman, don't get me wrong, but that kind of just weird, like, nasally, snarly, shrieky, almost kind of black metal thing that, Vitaly Kolopov is doing. One of my favorite vocal performances in all of thrash metal, or just metal in general. I don't know, great album, go and find it. Next.
앞머리 안 자를 거예요.
Oh god, it's these guys. Okay, it's in those wacky Russian letters. And it's like DRI, it's some band where it's just like 3 initials. And apparently it's weird looking A, backwards N, B.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
I don't know, my foolish Western brain, corrupted as it is by diet soda and hamburgers, cannot comprehend this foreign script.
Make a hamburger country! Nice.
But apparently, according to my text-to-speech technology, it's pronounced D.I.V. But for easy use, I'm just going to call them D.I.V. This band is really old school, and they're sort of like a proto-keyboard and all that entails. In order to not get myself in too much trouble, I'm gonna say their lyrical content is slightly to the right of most thrash metal bands, and if you look up the cover of their first album, it's rather... That album's a lot of fun, but my favorite from them is their second album, which is entitled Russian Frost. And you can tell from like the cover, the translations of the song titles, these guys have quite the sense of humor. And that's sort of one of the other like facets of thrash, is a lot of the bands, such as like Wehrmacht, Exodus, and whatnot, tended to write rather humorous lyrics. These guys are no exception, they're just doing it in Russian. This album came out in 1996. And the first song on it is entitled Rap Monkey. And despite this rather malevolent creation sounding riff, it's sort of a parody of the kind of hip-hop infection that was creeping into the remnants of thrash metal at this point in time. And I think it's a pretty catchy song. I dig it. I mean, obviously this song kind of ups the groove quotient for the purpose of the joke, but pretty much everything on this album has a pretty heavy groove to it. There's quite a bit of like X-Hoarder and Pantera and such to this music. It's very heavy, but it's also pretty darn metal for 90s thrash metal. But yeah, this is his goofy like fake rapping vocals, and I think they're fun. If you look up the lyrics, they're a little bit exciting. Apparently these guys not a fan of hip-hop, and they decided to make that known by recording a jokey thrash metal rap song. But luckily it's heavy, you know? It's heavy enough to kind of transcend its jokey origins. Other songs on the album, like the title track, are a bit more sophisticated sounding, with some interesting clean guitar segues. Very atmospheric, fitting of the album title. Russian Frost sounds like it could be a black metal thing. and it's all still pretty groovy. Like, you know how I said these guys are the proto-keyboard? Keyboard sort of exists in this nebulous realm between black metal, melodic death metal, and groove metal. These guys are sort of in between thrash metal and groove metal. And they're also rather right-wing, so that's why I consider them to be the proto-keyboard. I love keyboard, and I love these guys. They're great. Later on, these guys went a bit more into industrial territory, which actually isn't that uncommon for a right-wing Russian thrash metal band. The godfather of that scene, Korotsia Metala, were the first band to do that, and they did that way back in the 90s. Also, these guys, they do have 80s origins, and in fact, members of this band were involved with an early version of Shah at one point. How about that? Pretty interesting. And with that, we come full circle. That's the 3 Russian thrash metal bands I wanted you to check out. Hopefully you enjoyed at least one of them. I enjoyed all of them. And Got Yule, Merry Christmas, and all that other stuff.
Turns out some of the worst people in the world happen to be gay nerds. Isn't that weird?